Under the vast New Mexico sky, Tall Horse works alone. His weathered hands shape the sacred red stone, carving dreams he's never lived into a woman's form. For 30 years, he's been the tribe's solitary sculptor, the keeper of ancient ways. Each night he speaks to his creation as if she breathes, telling her stories of the children they might have had. The elders whisper he's gone strange from solitude, but Tall Horse knows something they don't. The stone speaks back. When morning light spills across the canyon, revealing roots breaking through solid rock beneath his statue, even Tall Horse doesn't understand. Could the old legends of the mother tree be more than stories? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first golden light of dawn painted the eastern sky as Tall Horse emerged from his small stone home. His daily ritual began the same way for decades, watching the sun rise over the canyon that had become his sanctuary. He carried his medicine pouch, worn leather softened by years of handling, containing treasures no one else would value. A lock of his mother's hair tied with sinew, a small wooden bear his father had carved, and pinches of tobacco, sage, and sacred pollen. He moved with the careful grace of a man who knew the land as intimately as his own heartbeat. At 62, his tall frame remained straight, though years of working stone had left his hands gnarled like the juniper trees that dotted the canyon. The tribal elders called him the last carver, for he alone maintained the ancient ways of coaxing spirit from stone. Another day, he whispered to the rising sun, his voice rough from disuse. He spoke more to his statues than to people these days. The path to his workshop wound between towering red rock formations. Above the workshop stood the mother tree, an ancient cottonwood that defied explanation, growing impossibly from solid rock. Its massive roots wrapped around stone like fingers, its canopy providing the only substantial shade in the upper canyon. Beneath this tree sat his latest creation, nearly complete after 3 years of patient work. Unlike the smaller pieces he occasionally sold to collectors or ceremonial figures he created for the tribe, this statue was entirely his own. Standing nearly his height, the woman emerged from red stone, her form suggesting both strength and gentleness. Though her face remained unfinished, the curve of her hips and the set of her shoulders spoke of quiet dignity. "Good morning," he said to the statue, setting his tools beside it. This private ritual would have shocked the reservation community, who knew him only as stoic and withdrawn. "I dreamed of you again last night." In the distance, he spotted a familiar figure making the long trek up from the reservation. Morning Star, the eldest of the tribal council, visited weekly despite the difficult journey. At 87, he remained surprisingly spry, though he now used a carved walking stick that Tall Horse had made for him years ago. Tall Horse felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came with human interaction, even with Morning Star, whom he had known since childhood. He busied himself preparing tea on the small fire outside his workshop. "You're earlier than usual, old friend," Tall Horse said when Morning Star finally reached the clearing. "These old legs wake me before the birds now," Morning Star replied, lowering himself onto a smooth stone seat with a grateful sigh. "Besides, there is news I thought you should hear." Tall Horse handed him a steaming cup of pine needle tea and waited. Morning Star never rushed important words. "The tribal council has voted to hear presentations from the resort developers," Morning Star finally said. "They want to build a luxury retreat in the lower canyon." Tall Horse's hand stilled on his own cup. "This canyon has been sacred land for 1,000 years. And some say it could save our people for 1,000 more," Morning Star countered gently. "The money would build a new health clinic, improve the school. Many families are leaving because there's no work." Tall Horse said nothing, his eyes moving to his statue. The unspoken question hung between them. Would this reach his sanctuary, his workshop, his sacred tree? "They haven't made any decisions," Morning Star assured him. "Thomas Blackwater and several others stand firmly against it." But times are hard, my friend. Tall Horse nodded once. He had removed himself from tribal politics decades ago, preferring stone to the complexities of human negotiations. But this struck at something deeper. I have brought you something, Morning Star said, changing the subject. From a small pouch, he withdrew a strand of turquoise beads, his grandmother's necklace, which Tall Horse recognized immediately. I found this while looking through my sister's belongings, Morning Star explained. She always said it should return to your family someday. Tall Horse took the necklace, memories flooding back of his grandmother wearing these stones at ceremonies, her voice telling stories of the mother tree and its spirit who walked as a woman in the ancient days. Thank you, he said simply, tucking the necklace into his medicine pouch. Another treasure, another memory, another piece of a past that seemed increasingly distant. When Morning Star left, promising to bring more news after the next council meeting, Tall Horse returned to his statue. The morning light caught the stone just so, and for a moment, he could have sworn the unfinished face held an expression of concern. Don't worry, he told the stone woman, picking up his chisel. This is our place. No one will take it from us. That evening, Tall Horse sat outside his home, grandmother's turquoise necklace resting in his palm. The polished stones caught the last light of day, each one hand-shaped by ancestors whose names were lost even to tribal memory. He had refused to wear it when his grandmother offered it to him 50 years ago. A man does not wear such things, he had said then, young and foolish, concerned with how others might see him. Now he traced each stone with his fingertip, remembering her stories of the mother tree. The roots go deeper than any man has traveled, she would say, her voice soft as she worked at her loom. They touch the underground rivers where the first spirits still live. And sometimes, when the world above has forgotten too much, she sends someone to remind us. Young Tall Horse had believed every word. The boy he once was had spent countless hours beneath the great cottonwood, waiting for the tree spirit to appear, leaving small offerings of cornmeal and carved figures. He tucked the necklace away and gazed toward his workshop where the statue waited. At 23, he had tried to join his life with a woman from a neighboring tribe, Sarah Blackfeather, with her quick laugh and hands that created beautiful beadwork. For 2 seasons, they had made plans for a home together. Then came the letter. She had met someone else, someone who did not spend weeks alone in canyons talking to stones. After that, Tall Horse had turned fully to his art. The tribal elders recognized his gift and encouraged his solitary path. Some men are meant to walk between worlds, the chief had told him. Your hands speak what our hearts have forgotten. A cry from above interrupted his thoughts. A red-tailed hawk circled the darkening sky. Tall Horse watched its flight with appreciation. The animals of the canyon had grown accustomed to his presence over the decades. Deer would graze within yards of his workshop. Rabbits sometimes ventured near his fire, and even the secretive mountain lion occasionally revealed itself on distant ridges, watching him with professional curiosity. The thought of developers coming here, bringing noise and buildings and people, made something tighten in his chest. He had seen what happened to sacred places when they became attractions. The lower reservation lands already featured a small casino, a gas station, and a trading post that sold mass-produced, authentic native crafts to tourists. Morning Star had mentioned that surveyors might come as early as next week. The tribal council remained divided, with economic necessity battling cultural preservation. Thomas Blackwater, one of the younger council members but deeply committed to traditional ways, led the opposition to development. But even Tall Horse understood the reality. The reservation's children left for cities where jobs and opportunities beckoned. The tribal school struggled with outdated textbooks and facilities. The health clinic could barely handle basic needs. Still, this canyon had been his sanctuary, his workshop, his temple. The mother tree had stood witness to centuries of prayers and ceremonies. His grandmother had taught him that all things had spirit, the stones, the trees, the water, but some places held more spirit than others. This canyon was such a place. In the fading light, Tall Horse gathered sage and cedar for his evening fire. As darkness settled, he lit the small bundle and wafted the fragrant smoke over himself, his home, and in the direction of his statue. Tomorrow he would gather the special clay from the canyon's northern wall, the one with mineral traces that produced the deep red pigments he needed for the final details of his statue. Nearby, a small garden of herbs and medicinal plants thrived despite the desert conditions. Tall Horse noticed something unusual. The sage he had planted last season had nearly doubled in size since yesterday. The wild primrose that normally produced a single bloom now displayed 5 perfect flowers. "Strange," he murmured, bending to examine the plants more closely. He had been gardening in this spot for decades and had never seen growth like this. Even the soil felt different, richer, darker, almost vibrating with energy beneath his fingers. He looked up at the stars now appearing overhead, wondering if unusual weather patterns might explain the growth. But in his heart, he felt a stirring of something long dormant, the childhood wonder that had once made him leave offerings beneath the mother tree, believing completely in his grandmother's stories of spirits and ancient powers awakening. Dawn found Tall Horse already at work, grinding minerals on his stone mortar. The red ochre from the canyon walls, yellow clay from the riverbed, charcoal from lightning-struck pine, white ash from ceremonial fires. Each had its place in his palette. He worked with practiced precision, adding water drop by drop until each pigment reached the perfect consistency. Beside him lay his most treasured tool, an ancient stone chisel, its edge still remarkably sharp despite centuries of use. The tool had passed through 7 generations of tribal sculptors, each adding their own prayers and power to the stone. Tall Horse's father had presented it to him when he completed his first ceremonial mask at 16. "This chisel remembers shapes our eyes have never seen," his father had told him. "Listen to it more than your own thoughts." The chisel had its own weight, its own balance that differed from his other tools. When he worked with it, the stone seemed to yield more willingly, as if recognizing an old friend. Tall Horse mixed the red ochre with a binding agent of pine resin, preparing to add color to the statue's lips and the subtle highlights in her hair. He worked slowly, meticulously, occasionally stepping back to study the effect in different light. "The colors must change with the sun's journey," he murmured to himself. Like a living face, a movement at the canyon entrance caught his attention. A tribal council vehicle kicked up dust as it approached, unusual this early in the day. Tall Horse recognized Thomas Blackwater at the wheel, accompanied by what appeared to be 2 outsiders in business attire. He set down his pigments with a sigh. The outside world rarely brought good news. Thomas parked a respectful distance from the workshop and approached alone first, the others hanging back. "Morning, Tall Horse," Thomas greeted him. At 45, Thomas walked a careful line between modern education and traditional ways. He'd gone to college, returned with a law degree, and now used that knowledge to protect tribal interests. "Thomas," Tall Horse acknowledged, "you've brought strangers to sacred ground." Thomas glanced back at the waiting men. They insisted on seeing the upper canyon. "They're from Diamond Sky Resorts. I thought it better I bring them than they come with tribal police escorts." Tall Horse's jaw tightened. "The council hasn't voted yet." "No, but they're eager to show what they're offering." Thomas lowered his voice. "I'm fighting this, Tall Horse, but you should know what we're facing. Their initial proposal is $50 million over 20 years, plus a percentage of resort profits. The sum hung in the air between them. For a reservation where many families lived on less than $20,000 a year, where the unemployment rate hovered near 60%, such money represented transformation. "Money is a poor exchange for spirit," Tall Horse said finally. Thomas nodded. "I agree. But not everyone sees with those eyes anymore." He hesitated. "Would you speak with them? Just briefly. They need to understand what this place means." Before Tall Horse could answer, A young boy of perhaps 12 darted past the businessman and ran toward the workshop. He stopped short when he saw Tall Horse, suddenly shy. "Michael," Thomas called, exasperated. "I told you to stay in the truck." "Sorry, Dad," the boy said, but his eyes were fixed on Tall Horse's work table with unconcealed fascination. Tall Horse studied the boy. He had the Blackwater family's sharp cheekbones and thoughtful eyes. "You're interested in the tools?" he asked. Michael nodded eagerly. "I've tried carving with my pocket knife, but it never turns out right." Something in the boy's earnest interest softened Tall Horse's resistance. He beckoned Michael closer and placed a small piece of soapstone in his hand, along with a beginner's carving tool. "Hold it like this," he demonstrated. "Let the stone tell you what it wants to be." While Michael tentatively began carving, Tall Horse turned to Thomas. "I'll speak to them, but not here by my work. Down by the river crossing." As Thomas went to fetch the businessman, Tall Horse observed Michael's natural handling of the stone, careful, respectful, with an intuitive understanding of the material. It had been many years since he'd seen such innate talent in young hands. "You have a gift," he told the boy quietly. "The stone speaks to you already." Michael looked up, his expression serious beyond his years. "Is that why you live up here alone? To hear what the stones say?" The question, innocent yet profound, caught Tall Horse by surprise. "Partly," he admitted, "and partly because I've forgotten how to hear what people say." When Thomas returned with the developers, Tall Horse noticed the statue seemed different somehow, the curve of her cheek more defined than he remembered carving it. He blinked, attributing the observation to tricks of the morning light. That night, Tall Horse woke suddenly from a deep sleep. His small home was filled with an unusual sound, a soft rustling, as if something moved through the undergrowth outside. But beneath that familiar desert noise lay something else, whispers barely audible, in a language he almost recognized. The dream catcher hanging above his bed swayed gently, though no breeze stirred the air. Its wooden hoop, wrapped in red leather with intricate webbing and eagle feathers, had been still for years. Now the feathers trembled as if alive. Tall Horse sat up, fully alert. The whispers faded, but the rustling continued. He lit a small oil lamp and moved to the door, listening. The sound seemed to come from the direction of his workshop. With quiet steps, he made his way along the familiar path. The quarter moon provided just enough light to navigate without his lamp, which he extinguished to better preserve his night vision. As he approached the workshop clearing, he stopped short. The great cottonwood, the mother tree, seemed to shimmer with a faint luminescence. Not the trunk or branches, but the leaves, each one glowing with a subtle blue-green light that pulsed like slow breathing. Beneath the tree, his statue stood as always, but something had changed. Tall Horse moved closer, eyes narrowing in the dim light. At the base of the statue, where stone met earth, tiny tendrils had pushed through the ground. Not weeds or desert scrub, but actual roots, pale, nearly translucent, and definitely not present the day before. They curved upward, touching the statue's feet with delicate filaments. "Impossible," Tall Horse whispered. The stone base sat on solid rock. He knelt to examine the phenomenon more closely. The roots were real, living tissue, somehow breaking through stone that had remained solid for countless millennia. He touched one gently. It was warm and seemed to pulse faintly beneath his fingertip. A sudden breeze rustled the glowing leaves above, and the whispers returned, louder now, almost but not quite forming words he could understand. Tall Horse stood quickly, feeling as though he had interrupted something private. Back in his home, sleep eluded him. The dream catcher continued its gentle swaying, casting strange shadows on the walls. Finally, as false dawn lightened the eastern sky, he drifted into uneasy slumber. He dreamed of his statue, but in the dream her face was complete, beautiful, wise, with eyes that held centuries of patience. She spoke his name, not his common name, but his sacred name given during his vision quest, a name he had shared with no living person. "You have called me," she said in his dream, "and I have answered." Morning found Tall Horse exhausted but determined to understand what he had witnessed. He hurried to his workshop as soon as light permitted safe passage. The mother tree appeared normal now, its leaves the ordinary green of cottonwood. But the roots remained, more visible in daylight, a network of pale tendrils spreading outward from the statue's base, some as thick as his little finger. He was still examining them when Morning Star's voice called from the path. "Tall Horse, are you there?" The old man appeared, moving faster than usual, his walking stick striking the ground with urgent taps. "The council votes tomorrow," Morning Star said without preamble. "The developers have increased their offer after seeing the canyon. They're promising to build around sacred sites, but their plans would still bring the resort within 100 yards of this spot." Tall Horse barely heard him, still focused on the root system emerging from solid stone. "Morning Star," he interrupted. "Do you see this?" The elder followed his gaze, bending stiffly to look more closely. "See what?" "The statue, the roots, coming through the stone." Morning Star squinted, then shook his head. "I see only your fine work, my friend." Tall Horse frowned. How could Morning Star not see what was so plainly visible? He pointed directly at the largest root. "Right here." Morning Star's expression shifted to concern. "There's nothing there, Tall Horse." A chill ran through Tall Horse despite the warming day. Was he losing his mind? He touched one of the roots again. It felt solid, real. "I must finish her face," he said suddenly, straightening. "Today." Morning Star studied him carefully. "You've worked on this statue for 3 years. Why the hurry now?" Tall Horse had no logical answer, only the overwhelming certainty that completing the statue had become urgently important. "Just time," he said finally. "Will you sit with me while I work? Tell me about the council's debate." As Morning Star settled on a nearby stone, Tall Horse selected his finest tools. The statue's face had resisted his efforts for months, never emerging quite as he envisioned. Now, with strange confidence, he began to carve, each stroke revealing what seemed to have been waiting beneath the stone all along. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the canyon, unusual for the season. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and electricity. Morning Star had long since departed, promising to return after the council vote with whatever news came. Tall Horse worked feverishly on the statue's face, his hands moving with uncanny certainty. Features emerged from the stone with surprising ease. High cheekbones, a straight nose, lips curved in the suggestion of a smile. Only the eyes remained unfinished, and those he approached with particular care. "The eyes are the doorway," his father had taught him. "Carve them last, and carve them with prayer, for through them the spirit enters." As the first fat raindrops began to fall, Tall Horse reluctantly covered his work. The approaching storm looked severe, with lightning already dancing between clouds on the horizon. He gathered his most precious tools and headed to his workshop's small interior room, designed for shelter during rare desert downpours. The storm hit with unexpected ferocity. Rain hammered against the workshop, wind howled through the canyon, and lightning struck with alarming frequency. Through the single small window, Tall Horse could see the mother tree thrashing in the gale, yet somehow appearing to move against the wind rather than with it. He found himself reaching for the strange seed pod he had discovered that morning near the statue's base. Another inexplicable addition to the growing mystery. Unlike anything native to the region, the pod was the size of his palm, with a hard, iridescent shell that shifted colors in different light. He had intended to show it to Morning Star, but had forgotten in the rush of the day's events. Now he turned it over in his hands, feeling its surprising warmth. The surface pulsed faintly, like something alive. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the pod from within for a brief moment, revealing what looked like a miniature tree structure inside. The storm raged throughout the night. Unable to return to his home, Tall Horse eventually dozed in his workshop, the strange seed pod still clutched in his hand. His dreams were vivid. He saw the canyon as it might have been centuries ago, teeming with people, ceremonies conducted beneath the mother tree. He saw his own ancestors carving stone, their faces so similar to his own. And weaving through these visions, a woman with eyes like deep water, watching him with ancient patience. When he woke, the storm had passed. Dawn light filtered through the window, and silence had returned to the canyon. Tall Horse stretched his stiff limbs and stepped outside to assess any damage. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. The ground around his statue had completely transformed. What had been a few tendrils the night before was now an extensive network of roots, thick as his wrist, breaking through solid stone in a pattern that radiated outward for 20 feet in all directions. The mother tree above seemed more vibrant, its leaves greener, its trunk somehow straighter. But most shocking of all was the statue itself. The face he had left unfinished now looked complete, the eyes perfectly carved with an expression of serene wisdom. He approached slowly, disbelievingly. He had not carved those eyes, yet they were flawless, better than anything he could have created himself. As he stood transfixed, a movement at the edge of his vision made him turn. Beneath the mother tree stood a woman. Tall Horse blinked, certain his mind was playing tricks. But she remained tall, slender, with skin the color of burnished cedar and hair that fell in waves the color of raven wings. She wore what appeared to be a simple dress of woven plant fibers, and her feet were bare against the rocky ground. Most striking were her eyes, identical to those now carved on his statue. She regarded him silently, head slightly tilted as if curious. When Tall Horse took a step toward her, she retreated slightly, melting partially into the tree's shadow. Before he could speak, the sound of an approaching vehicle broke the moment. The woman vanished, not running away, but simply gone, as if she had never been there at all. Morning Star's truck appeared around the canyon bend. The old man was driving faster than usual, dust billowing behind his vehicle. Even from a distance, Tall Horse could see the grim set of his friend's face. The news from the tribal council would not be good. Morning Star emerged from his truck carrying a carved wooden stick adorned with eagle feathers and small turquoise beads. The tribal talking stick, used only for the most significant council proceedings. His face was lined with concern. The vote was 11-7 in favor of continued negotiations, he said without preamble. They've scheduled a final decision for next month, but preliminary approvals were given for more extensive surveys. Tall Horse barely registered the words, his mind still fixated on the woman he had seen. "Did you pass anyone on the road up here?" he asked. Morning Star looked puzzled. "No one." "Why?" Tall Horse hesitated, then gestured toward his statue. "Look at her face. I didn't finish it yesterday." The elder approached the statue, studying it with narrowed eyes. "It's your finest work," he said after a long moment. "The eyes? They remind me of stories my grandmother told." "I didn't carve the eyes," Tall Horse said quietly. Morning Star's gaze sharpened. "What are you saying?" Before Tall Horse could answer, the sound of another vehicle echoed through the canyon. A moment later, Thomas Blackwater's SUV appeared, with young Michael in the passenger seat and a tribal police officer in the back. Thomas looked grim as he approached. "Morning Star, Tall Horse," he greeted them tersely. "The survey team is right behind me. The chairman sent Officer Benali to ensure there are no disruptions." Officer Benali, a young man who had only recently joined the tribal police, looked uncomfortable but nodded respectfully to the elders. "And the boy?" Morning Star asked, looking at Michael. "My sister couldn't watch him today," Thomas explained. "He insisted on coming when he heard where I was going." Michael approached Tall Horse shyly. "I finished carving the stone you gave me," he said, pulling a small figure from his pocket. A crude but recognizable bird. "Good work," Tall Horse told him, momentarily distracted from the crisis at hand. "You listened to the stone." The boy beamed, then glanced past Tall Horse toward the mother tree. His expression changed to one of surprise. "Who's that lady?" Everyone turned. There, partially visible behind the massive trunk, stood the woman Tall Horse had seen earlier. "You see her?" Tall Horse asked the boy urgently. Michael nodded. "She's pretty. Why is she hiding?" The adults exchanged confused glances. "There's no one there, Michael," Thomas said gently. "But she's right there, Dad," Michael insisted, pointing directly at the figure. Morning Star's expression grew grave. "The boy sees," he murmured. "As you do, Tall Horse?" Tall Horse nodded slowly. "She appeared after the storm. When I approach, she vanishes." Morning Star sank heavily onto a nearby stone. "My grandmother spoke of this. The mother tree has a spirit that takes female form in times of great need." He touched the talking stick reverently. "That is why I brought this. The signs have been appearing in my dreams." Thomas looked skeptical. "You believe this canyon has a guardian spirit?" "Not the canyon," Morning Star corrected. "The mother tree. And if she shows herself now, the threat is greater than we realized." Officer Benali shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the survey team will be here any minute." Tall Horse looked at the woman again. She had emerged slightly from behind the tree, her gaze fixed on him with unmistakable intent. Despite the impossibility of the situation, he felt drawn to her, not just by her beauty, but by a sense of recognition that defied explanation. "I need to speak with her," he said. "How?" Thomas asked, still clearly doubtful. Tall Horse took the talking stick from Morning Star. "This has been used to speak sacred truths for generations. Perhaps it will help now." He approached the tree slowly, talking stick extended before him. The woman remained visible, watching him with those remarkable eyes identical to those now carved on his statue. "I am Tall Horse," he said softly when he was a few paces away. "This is sacred Apache land. Are you the spirit of the mother tree?" For a long moment, she remained silent. Then her lips moved, and he heard her voice, low, melodic, with an accent he couldn't place. "I am Eyes," she said, "root of the world tree. You have called me with your hands and heart." "Only I can see you," he said. "And the boy?" She nodded. "Those with open spirits see. Those with closed minds cannot." "Why have you come now?" Her expression grew solemn. "Because the roots that connect all living things are being severed. Because you have spent a lifetime creating beauty in solitude, speaking to stone as if it lives. Because you understand what others have forgotten." Behind him, Tall Horse could hear the others talking in concerned voices, but their words seemed distant and unimportant compared to this impossible conversation. "The developers are coming," he told her. "They want to build here." "I know," she replied. "That is why the time of watching has ended. Now begins the time of action." The tribal council chamber hadn't changed in the 30 years since Tall Horse last entered it. The circular room with its domed ceiling still featured the same hand-carved benches arranged in concentric rings. The same sacred symbols adorned the walls, and the air still carried the lingering scent of sage from cleansing ceremonies. What had changed were the faces. Of the 19 council members seated as Tall Horse entered, only Morning Star remained from the council he had known in his youth. The others were strangers to him, though he recognized family resemblances in their features, the children and grandchildren of his former peers. His appearance caused a stir. Several elders whispered behind their hands, and the tribal chairman, Jacob Running Bear, looked visibly surprised. "Tall Horse," he acknowledged with a respectful nod. "It has been many seasons since you honored the council with your presence." Tall Horse said nothing, taking the seat Morning Star had saved for him in the inner circle. Thomas Blackwater sat nearby, his expression guarded but hopeful. At the center of the room, resting on a small pedestal, was the survey map the developers had prepared. The detailed rendering showed the proposed resort complex spreading through the lower canyon, with roads, buildings, and recreational facilities transforming the landscape. Though the upper canyon where Tall Horse lived and worked was marked as Cultural Preservation Zone, the development would reach within 100 yards of the mother tree. Chairman Running Bear called the meeting to order with the traditional striking of the ceremonial drum. "We gather today to hear voices on the proposed Diamond Sky Resort development," he announced. "The preliminary vote has approved continued exploration of this opportunity, but no final decision has been made." The council's secretary read the official offer: $53 million over 20 years, 300 permanent jobs reserved for tribal members, profit sharing after the 5th year, and promises to incorporate cultural elements into the design while preserving access to sacred sites. As the reading concluded, a man in an expensive suit stood and approached the council circle. David Blackwell, Diamond Sky's development director, smiled confidently as he addressed the gathering. "We're not just building a resort," he said smoothly. "We're creating a partnership that honors the Apache heritage while bringing economic sustainability to the reservation. Our architects have studied your cultural symbols and will incorporate them respectfully into every aspect of the design." He gestured toward the map. "As you can see, we've already adjusted our plans to maintain a buffer zone around significant cultural areas." Several council members nodded appreciatively. Tall Horse noticed the tribal treasurer, a young woman with modern glasses and a laptop before her, looking particularly impressed. When Blackwell finished his polished presentation, Chairman Running Bear turned to Thomas. "Councillor Blackwater, you wish to speak in opposition?" Thomas rose, his law school training evident in his measured tone. "This development would fundamentally alter our relationship with the land," he began. "While the financial benefits are substantial, they come at the cost of our most sacred canyon, a place central to our ceremonies and identity for countless generations." He pointed to specific areas on the map. These minimal-impact pathways would cross ancient burial grounds. This scenic overlook would place a restaurant directly above ceremonial caves. The council listened respectfully, but Tall Horse could sense their divided priorities. For a people struggling with poverty, addiction, and the slow erosion of their culture, the developers' promises held powerful appeal. When Thomas concluded, Chairman Running Bear addressed Tall Horse directly. "We have heard that you wish to speak, honored sculptor. This is unusual, as you have chosen silence in council matters for many years." Tall Horse rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. For a man who had spent decades in solitude, this public speaking was more difficult than any stone he had ever carved. But Rai's words echoed in his mind. "The time of watching has ended. 3 nights ago," he began, his voice rough from disuse but gaining strength. "Roots broke through solid stone beneath the mother tree. Yesterday, a woman appeared there, a spirit woman seen only by myself and young Michael Blackwater." Murmurs rippled through the council. Skepticism showed on many faces, but Tall Horse continued undeterred. "Our grandmothers told us the mother tree holds the spirit of our ancestors. They warned that disturbing its roots would bring great misfortune." He paused, meeting the chairman's gaze directly. "I invite all council members to visit the Upper Canyon. See the statue the spirit has completed. Witness the roots that grow where no roots should be possible." Chairman Running Bear looked troubled. "Are you suggesting we should reject $53 million because of supernatural occurrences?" "I am suggesting," Tall Horse replied steadily, "that some things have value beyond money. Some bonds, once broken, cannot be restored with any wealth." The next afternoon, a procession of vehicles wound up the canyon road toward Tall Horse's sanctuary. The entire tribal council had accepted his invitation, along with several elders not on the council but respected for their wisdom. Thomas Blackwater drove the lead vehicle, with Chairman Running Bear beside him. Tall Horse waited by the mother tree, his statue now almost completely enveloped by the root system that had continued to grow at an impossible rate. The roots had formed an intricate latticework around the stone figure, as if embracing it while simultaneously transforming it. Rayeyes stood beside him, visible only to his eyes. "Some will see," she said softly. "Some will feel. Some will remain blind. Will you show yourself to them?" Tall Horse asked. "Only to those with eyes already open," she replied. "You cannot force vision on those who choose blindness." As the council members emerged from their vehicles and approached the clearing, their reactions varied dramatically. Several gasped at the sight of the root-encased statue. Others squinted in confusion. A few hung back, uncomfortable with the obvious strangeness before them. Morning Star stepped forward first, carrying a leather-bound book, his grandfather's journal, which recorded tribal history and prophecies. The old man approached the statue and laid his hand gently on the intricate root pattern. "It is as my grandfather wrote," he said, his voice carrying in the afternoon stillness. He opened the journal, turning to a marked page. "In the time when the people forget their connection to the earth, the mother tree will awaken. Her roots will rise to remind us of what lies beneath the surface." Chairman Running Bear approached cautiously. "These roots, they weren't here during the survey last week?" "They began 3 nights ago," Tall Horse confirmed. "After the storm." The tribal treasurer, Lisa Begay, scoffed openly. "You expect us to believe these roots broke through solid rock overnight? This has to be some kind of trick." "Touch them," Tall Horse invited. Reluctantly, she did, then jerked her hand back in surprise. "They're warm, and I swear I felt a pulse." Michael, who had come with his father, suddenly pointed toward Rayeyes. "The lady is here again, Dad. Can't you see her?" The council members looked around in confusion, seeing nothing where the boy pointed. "There's no one there, son," Thomas said gently. "She's right there," Michael insisted. "By the big tree, next to Mr. Tall Horse." Morning Star approached the boy, kneeling despite his arthritic knees. "What does she look like, Michael?" "She's tall and pretty. Her skin is like the tree bark, and her hair is black like ravens. Her dress looks like it's made of leaves, and she has no shoes." The description matched exactly what Tall Horse saw. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances. Councilman Joseph Sakei, who had remained skeptical throughout, stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. The boy is obviously coached, and these roots." He reached out to touch one, intending to prove some point, but as his fingers contacted the living wood, he staggered backward as if shocked. "What did you see?" Morning Star asked sharply. Sakei's face had paled. "Nothing. I saw nothing." But his hands trembled as he rejoined the group. Morning Star opened his grandfather's journal again. "There is more written here. My grandfather recorded a similar manifestation in 1879, when the government sought to relocate our people. He wrote that his grandmother had seen it before that, when Spanish missionaries tried to build a church in this canyon. He turned the book so others could see the yellowed pages with their careful handwriting. The journal says the mother tree has protected this land since before our people came here. It says her roots connect to the ancient powers beneath the earth." Lisa Begay still looked unconvinced. "Even if we accept this phenomenon, what does it have to do with the resort development? The plans preserve this area." "The roots go deeper than you know," Tall Horse said, repeating the words his grandmother had often used. "What you build below will harm what lives above." As if in response to his words, the ground trembled slightly. Several council members stepped back in alarm as new roots broke through the stone surface near their feet. Chairman Running Bear's expression had grown increasingly troubled. "I've seen enough for today," he announced. "We need to discuss this further." As the council prepared to depart, Michael lingered, gazing at Ray Eyes with undisguised fascination. "Why can only me and Mr. Tall Horse see you?" he asked her directly. Though the adults heard only the boy speaking to empty air, Tall Horse heard Ray Eyes' gentle response. "Because you both remember how to listen with more than ears and see with more than eyes." Michael nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "Will you teach me more about the tree?" "If your father permits it," she said. "There is much you could learn." When the council had departed, Tall Horse found himself alone with Ray Eyes and a growing sense that events had been set in motion that would change everything. Not just for him, but for his people and the land they called home. The following morning, Tall Horse found himself rummaging through boxes he hadn't opened in decades. The council's visit had stirred memories of his grandmother's teachings, stories and ceremonies he had set aside in his devotion to stone. Near the bottom of an old cedar chest, wrapped in softened deerskin, he found what he sought, his grandmother's flute. Made from river cane with intricate carvings of spiraling plants, the instrument had been played at sacred ceremonies for 5 generations. "You have found it," Ray Eyes said, appearing suddenly beside him. In the days since her first manifestation, she had become more substantial, more present. While still invisible to most, her voice now carried on the air rather than seeming to speak directly into his mind. "My grandmother said this flute could call to the plant spirits," Tall Horse explained, handling the instrument with reverence. "I never learned to play it properly." "The knowing is in your breath, not your fingers," Ray Eyes said. "Bring it to the mother tree." Beneath the great cottonwood, the transformation continued. Roots had spread in an ever-widening circle, breaking through stone with inexorable patience. The statue was now barely recognizable as stone. Living wood had nearly engulfed it, reshaping its contours into something both less and more than art. Tall Horse sat cross-legged before this merger of his creation and the living entity. Ray Eyes positioned herself opposite him, her form shimmering slightly in the morning light. "Play from your heart," she instructed. "Not for me, but for the roots beneath us." Tall Horse lifted the flute to his lips. Though he had never properly learned, his fingers found positions that felt right. He breathed into the instrument, expecting discordant sounds, but what emerged was a clear, haunting note that seemed to vibrate in the very stones around them. The response was immediate and astonishing. The visible roots quivered, then began to move with deliberate purpose, stretching and expanding. New tendrils broke through the ground in rhythm with the music. The leaves of the mother tree rustled without wind, creating a whispering accompaniment to his playing. Lost in the music and the miraculous response, Tall Horse didn't notice the approaching vehicle until it was nearly upon them. He lowered the flute as Thomas Blackwater's SUV came into view, carrying not just Thomas but also a suited man Tall Horse didn't recognize. "That was beautiful," Thomas said as he approached, genuine appreciation in his voice. "I didn't know you played." "I don't," Tall Horse admitted, carefully rewrapping the flute. "Or didn't until today." Thomas gestured to his companion. "This is Professor Alan Whitefeather from the University of New Mexico. He specializes in indigenous botanical knowledge and sacred sites. I thought he might help us understand what's happening here." Professor Whitefeather, a middle-aged man with mixed native and Anglo features, nodded respectfully. "Mr. Tall Horse, it's an honor. Your sculptural work is renowned throughout the Southwest." Tall Horse acknowledged the greeting with a nod, noticing how the professor's gaze moved past him several times, as if sensing something just beyond perception. "You see something?" he asked directly. The professor hesitated. "Not see exactly, but there's definitely something, a presence." He moved toward the root-encased statue, then stopped abruptly several feet away. "The energy here is remarkable, like nothing I've encountered at other sacred sites." Thomas looked encouraged. Professor Whitefeather has helped several tribes establish legal protection for spiritual grounds. He's documented similar phenomena, though nothing quite this dramatic. The developers have brought in their own experts, the professor explained, kneeling to examine the roots without touching them. Environmental scientists, geologists, all prepared to testify that this canyon has no unique ecological significance. They're wrong, Tall Horse said simply. Obviously, White Feather agreed. But courts don't generally accept supernatural phenomena as evidence. We need to translate what's happening here into terms federal judges can understand and accept. As they spoke, Ray's moved to stand directly beside the professor. Though he couldn't see her, White Feather shivered visibly, rubbing his arms. Temperature just dropped about 10 degrees right here, he murmured. The Mother Tree Spirit stands beside you, Tall Horse told him. Instead of dismissing this, White Feather nodded thoughtfully. Many indigenous traditions speak of plant consciousness, particularly in ancient trees. Western science is only beginning to understand the complex communication systems between plants. He turned to Thomas. We should document everything: growth patterns, temperature variations, soil changes. If we can demonstrate unusual biological activity, we might secure temporary protection under environmental regulations. Thomas looked relieved to have a practical approach. The council remains divided, but this morning's news has shifted some opinions our way. What news? Tall Horse asked. Diamond Sky's parent company has a troubling environmental record, Thomas explained. I had a researcher friend investigate. They've been fined multiple times for contaminating groundwater at other developments. When I presented this at an emergency session this morning, even some pro-development council members grew concerned. The roots know, Ray said quietly to Tall Horse. They feel the poison in other places where these people have built. The earth remembers. As word spread about the extraordinary phenomena in the Upper Canyon, Morning Star arrived with 4 tribal elders, each carrying items for a protection ceremony. The oldest, Grace Running Water, brought a shallow ceramic bowl, the water blessing bowl used only in times of great tribal need. Its surface depicted the origin story of the Apache people in faded pigments applied centuries ago. The council remains divided, Morning Star explained as they arranged the ceremonial objects in a circle around the statue and spreading roots. But these elders have dreamed warnings. They felt compelled to come. Grace, who had been the tribe's most respected medicine woman for over 40 years, studied the root patterns with eyes clouded by cataracts. The old ones are stirring, she murmured. I feel them moving beneath us. She placed the water-blessing bowl at the center of their circle. Tall Horse, you will assist me. The others will form the outer circle. Tall Horse glanced at Ray, who nodded encouragement. Though invisible to the others, she positioned herself at the northern point of their circle. The ceremony began with Grace pouring clear spring water into the ancient bowl. She added pinches of sacred herbs, sage, cedar, tobacco, and sweetgrass, while chanting in the old language. Tall Horse recognized prayers he hadn't heard since childhood, invocations to the spirits of earth, air, fire, and water. When the bowl was prepared, Grace motioned for Tall Horse to kneel opposite her. You have been chosen, she told him, her milky eyes somehow finding his with unerring accuracy. Not just by the mother tree, but long before, when you first shaped stone with dreaming hands. She dipped her fingers in the blessed water and marked his forehead. Repeat after me. The words she spoke were older than any Tall Horse had heard before, not Apache but something more ancient. He repeated them, feeling their vibration in his chest more than hearing them with his ears. As the final syllables left his lips, the water in the bowl began to tremble, then swirl of its own accord. Above them, clouds gathered with unnatural speed, darkening the sky from clear blue to threatening gray in minutes. Grace raised her arms. The blessing comes. Rain fell, but in a way Tall Horse had never witnessed. A perfect circle of precipitation directly over the ceremonial space, with clear sky visible beyond its boundaries. The droplets seemed to glow slightly as they fell, and where they touched the spreading roots, small green shoots immediately sprouted. The elders' chanting grew louder, matching the intensity of the localized downpour. For nearly 10 minutes, the impossible rain continued, soaking the participants while areas just yards away remained completely dry. When it finally ceased, the transformation was unmistakable. The entire area around the mother tree had erupted with new growth. Ferns, flowers, and small shrubs that should have taken months to develop had sprung fully formed from the rain-soaked ground. "It is done," Grace announced with satisfaction. "The boundary is marked. The warning is given." As the elders packed their ceremonial items, a commotion at the canyon entrance caught everyone's attention. Several vehicles bearing tribal police markings approached, followed by news vans from Albuquerque and Phoenix stations. "What's happening?" Tall Horse asked, alarmed by the intrusion. Morning Star looked equally surprised. "I don't know. The council didn't authorize this." Chief of Police Ben Longbow stepped from the lead vehicle, his expression apologetic as he approached. "Morning Star, Tall Horse, elders. I'm sorry for this intrusion. Chairman Running Bear has declared the Upper Canyon open to scientific investigation and media documentation." He gestured toward the gathering crowd of reporters and cameramen. "I was ordered to escort them and ensure access. This is sacred space," Morning Star protested. "We just completed protection ceremonies." "I understand," Longbow said quietly. "But the chairman says transparency is needed. Too many rumors are spreading." As if to prove his point, a reporter broke away from the group, hurrying toward them with a microphone extended. "Sir, can you explain the unusual weather patterns reported in this area? Witnesses in the reservation say rain fell in a perfect circle here yesterday." Before anyone could respond, more reporters surged forward, cameras rolling as they captured footage of the root-encased statue and unnaturally lush vegetation. "Is it true a tribal sculptor claims to see a spirit woman here? What can you tell us about the resort development plans? Are these root formations natural or man-made?" The barrage of questions continued as Tall Horse backed away, overwhelmed by the intrusion. For a man who had spent decades in solitude, this sudden exposure felt like a physical assault. "Stand firm," Rayeyes whispered, suddenly beside him. Though invisible to the cameras and reporters, her presence steadied him. "This too serves our purpose. What grows in darkness cannot be denied in light." Grace somehow found her way to Tall Horse's side despite her limited vision. "The coming of outsiders was foretold," she told him quietly. "When the mother tree awakens, the world beyond must bear witness." The media invasion continued for 3 days. Reporters camped at the canyon entrance. Scientists set up monitoring equipment around the perimeter of the root system, and curious visitors from neighboring communities arrived in a steady stream. Through it all, Tall Horse retreated further into his workshop, emerging only when necessary. On the 4th morning, he woke before dawn to find Rayeyes waiting outside his door. In the moonlight, she seemed more substantial than ever, her form casting a faint shadow on the ground. "It is time," she said without preamble. "Today you must see with different eyes." She held out her hands, offering a clay mask unlike any Tall Horse had seen before. Formed from river clay mixed with crushed minerals, its surface depicted a face that was neither human nor plant but something in between. Subtle patterns resembling root systems flowed across its surface. "What is this?" he asked, taking the mask carefully. "A bridge between worlds," she answered, "created by your hands while you slept." Tall Horse stared at the mask in confusion. "I made this." "Your body did, guided by ancient memory." She gestured toward his hands, and he noticed for the first time the dried clay under his fingernails, embedded in the creases of his palms. "I don't remember." "That is why you need the mask, to remember what your waking mind has forgotten." She led him to the mother tree, where the statue was now almost completely integrated with the living root system. In the pre-dawn stillness, the transformed sculpture seemed to pulse with gentle light. "Put on the mask and walk the boundary circle," Rayeyes instructed. "What you see will change everything." Tall Horse hesitated, then slowly raised the mask to his face. The moment it touched his skin, he felt a surge of energy flow through his body, as if he had plunged into an electrical current. His vision blurred, then cleared, but what he saw now was utterly transformed. The world around him appeared overlaid with luminous patterns. Every plant glowed with inner light, connected by threads of energy that pulsed between them like living circuitry. The mother tree blazed like a beacon, its massive root system visible beneath the earth as an intricate network extending far beyond what he had imagined. Following Rayeyes' instruction, he walked the boundary circle where the ceremonial rain had fallen. Each step revealed more of the hidden reality beneath the visible world. He could see roots stretching throughout the entire canyon, connecting every living thing in a vast communication network. Most shocking of all, he could now see these roots extending beyond the upper canyon, running beneath the entire reservation. The mother tree wasn't just a single sacred entity. It was the central hub of a living system that nourished and connected the tribe's entire homeland. When he followed one particularly strong root line with his enhanced vision, he saw it led directly to the tribal council building, wrapping around its foundation like protective arms. Another major line connected to the tribal school, and still another to the ceremonial grounds where major rituals were held. Overwhelmed, Tall Horse removed the mask. The world snapped back to normal appearance, though the memory of what he had seen remained vivid. "Now you understand," Rayeyes said. "The development would sever these connections, not just here, but throughout your people's land." "I must show the council," Tall Horse said urgently. "Not all can wear the mask," she cautioned. "Only those with the right preparation." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of heavy machinery starting up. Tall Horse hurried to the canyon's edge and looked down in horror. Despite the ongoing scientific study and media attention, Diamond Sky had moved construction equipment to the lower canyon. He could see massive earth movers and bulldozers assembling near the proposed resort site. Workers in hard hats consulted blueprints while tribal police kept protesters, a small but vocal group including Thomas Blackwater, behind a hastily erected barrier. Tall Horse ran back to the workshop, the mask clutched in his hand. "They're starting work already. The council hasn't made a final decision. They fear what is happening here," Rayeyes explained. "They rush now, to establish their claim before the spirits fully awaken." As if in response to her words, the ground trembled slightly. Near the construction site, a worker jumped back as the earth cracked open and a pale root, similar to those around the mother tree, pushed through the surface. "We must act quickly," Rayeyes said. "Bring the mask. We need allies who can see." As they hurried down the canyon path, Tall Horse spotted Morning Star's truck approaching, moving with unusual speed. The old man's face was grim as he pulled alongside them. "Thomas has been arrested," he reported. "He tried to stop the construction crew from entering the lower canyon. The chairman authorized preliminary ground clearing despite the council's agreement to wait." The chaos at the construction site had drawn an even larger media presence. As Morning Star drove them toward the lower canyon, they passed news vans from as far away as Denver and Los Angeles. Scientists from several universities had established a makeshift research camp, their instruments recording the increasingly strange phenomena occurring throughout the area. "The world is watching now," Morning Star observed. "Perhaps that will help our cause." When they arrived at the site, they found an unexpected development. A team of archaeologists was cordoning off an area near the bulldozers, carefully brushing dirt from what appeared to be a stone tablet partially exposed by the construction equipment. Dr. Elena Martinez, the lead archaeologist, was arguing heatedly with David Blackwell, the Diamond Sky representative. "This is potentially a significant find," she insisted. "Federal law requires a complete archaeological assessment before any further disturbance." We have permits, Blackwell responded tersely. This is just a rock with some weathering patterns. Tall Horse approached, drawn to the partially uncovered tablet. Even from several feet away, he could see that the stone bore carved symbols similar to those on his grandmother's oldest ceremonial items. Dr. Martinez noticed his interest. Are you familiar with these markings? She asked. They're Apache, he confirmed. Very old. Sacred writing. She nodded eagerly. That's what I thought. This could date back several centuries. The discovery had created a temporary halt to construction, with workers standing idle as the archaeological team documented the find. Thomas Blackwater, released from custody but still wearing the paper bracelet from the tribal jail, joined them. They've got a court order to proceed with preliminary work, he explained, frustration evident in his voice. But a significant archaeological find would trigger federal protection protocols. As they spoke, one of the archaeologists carefully brushed away more soil from the tablet, revealing additional symbols. Dr. Martinez, you need to see this. The symbols depicted a human figure, clearly a sculptor or carver, standing beneath a large tree. Opposite the human stood another figure, feminine in form but with features suggesting a connection to the tree itself. Between them was what appeared to be a carved statue, partially merged with roots. Tall Horse felt a chill run through him. The tablet was depicting exactly what had happened between him and Reyes. Dr. Martinez looked from the tablet to Tall Horse with growing excitement. These markings suggest this is a prophecy tablet, she said. It appears to show a union between a human creator and a tree spirit. The dating techniques will take time, but based on weathering and stylistic elements, this could be several centuries old. Morning Star stepped forward, leaning heavily on his walking stick. Our stories tell of such a prophecy, he confirmed, that in a time of great threat to the land, the mother tree would choose a human vessel to help protect the sacred connections. The archaeologist looked intrigued. Do you have any documented versions of the story? Written records would strengthen the case for protecting this site. Better than that, Thomas interjected. We have living proof. He gestured toward the upper canyon, where the transformed statue and spreading root system had become visible even from this distance. As the group debated the significance of the tablet, Tall Horse felt a gentle touch on his arm. Reyes stood beside him, her expression solemn. The tablet speaks truth, she said quietly, but not the whole truth. What do you mean? He asked. Your grandmother knew. She saw this day coming. Before Tall Horse could question her further, Morning Star swayed suddenly, his face going pale. Thomas caught him before he could fall. I need to sit down, the old man whispered. Not feeling well. They helped him to a nearby boulder. Morning Star's breathing was labored, his normally alert eyes unfocused. Should we call for medical help? Dr. Martinez asked with concern. Morning Star shook his head weakly. Take me to my home, he told Thomas. I have something important to share with Tall Horse. As Thomas helped Morning Star to his truck, Blackwell approached the archaeologists with a team of men in suits, company lawyers by their appearance. We'll need to see documentation proving these markings are genuinely historical and not recent fabrications, one lawyer stated. Our experts will want to examine the find. Dr. Martinez stood her ground. This site is now under archaeological protection. Your construction is halted pending a full assessment. We have federal permits and tribal authorization, Blackwell countered. One interesting rock doesn't change that. The argument escalated, drawing media attention. Cameras turned to capture the confrontation, reporters pushing microphones toward anyone who might provide a quotable comment. Tall Horse slipped away from the chaos, following Thomas and Morning Star. As they drove toward the elder's home, he noticed something alarming. Where the construction equipment had disturbed the ground, the root systems he had seen while wearing the mask were damaged. He could feel Reyes' distress without her needing to speak it. They're hurting you, he said quietly. They're hurting everything, she corrected. What they cut there weakens connections throughout the tribal lands. Already your elder feels it. His spirit has been nourished by those roots for all his life. Morning Star's small home sat on the eastern edge of the reservation, its windows facing the sunrise. Inside, the walls were lined with books, traditional crafts, and family photographs spanning generations. Now the elder lay on his bed, his breathing shallow but steady after Thomas had given him medication for his heart condition. "Stubborn old man," Thomas muttered with affection. "He's been refusing to see the doctor for weeks." Morning Star's eyes fluttered open. "Doctors cannot heal what ails me," he said weakly. "The cutting of the roots, I felt it like a knife." He gestured toward an old wooden box on his bedside table. "Tall Horse, inside. There's a letter for you." Tall Horse opened the box carefully. Among various keepsakes and sacred items lay a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. His name was written on it in his grandmother's distinctive handwriting. "She gave it to me 40 years ago," Morning Star explained. "Said I would know when it was time." With trembling fingers, Tall Horse broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but his grandmother's words remained clear. "My dear grandson, if you are reading this, the mother tree has awakened, and you have met her spirit in human form. I too saw her in my youth, though I was not the one she sought. She showed me visions of you, not yet born, creating beauty from stone with hands that could speak to the earth. What happens now was set in motion generations ago. The mother tree has waited for one with both the gift of creation and a heart pure enough to understand what must be done. The statue you will carve, yes, I have seen it, is not merely art but a vessel prepared for something greater. The division among our people is part of the test. Some must oppose so that others may defend what is sacred. This is the way of balance. When the time comes for union between you and the tree spirit, remember that nothing of value is gained without sacrifice. What you give up will return transformed. Trust her. Trust yourself. The future of our people rests in your hands. Hands I have watched since you were a child, knowing they were meant for more than ordinary work. With all my love, grandmother." Tall Horse read the letter twice, his mind struggling to accept its implications. "She knew," he whispered. "All those years ago. She was the strongest seer our tribe has known in generations," Morning Star confirmed. "She guided your path without your knowing." Thomas, who had read the letter over Tall Horse's shoulder, looked troubled. "This seems like a heavy burden to place on one person." "Not one person," Rayai said, suddenly visible in the corner of the room. "Two becoming one." Thomas jumped in shock. "I can see you." Morning Star smiled weakly. "The proximity to death thins the veil between worlds. My approaching sunset allows Thomas to see what has been hidden." Rayais approached Morning Star's bedside. "Old friend of the roots, your service has been long and faithful. And yours has been patient beyond measure," he replied. "Is it truly time?" She nodded. "The vessel is prepared. The sculptor is ready, though he does not yet know it. But there is a price to be paid." She turned to Tall Horse. "To complete our union, to fully manifest in physical form, I must have a permanent anchor in this world. Your statue provides the form, but something more is needed." "What?" Tall Horse asked. "A sacrifice freely given," she said softly. "Your gift, your ability to create from stone, must be surrendered." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For Tall Horse, his artistic ability had been his identity, his purpose, his only true connection to the world for decades. "You're asking him to give up everything he is," Thomas protested. "No," Rayais corrected. "I'm asking him to become something more." Before Tall Horse could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching broke the moment. Through the window, they could see tribal police cars and a sleek black SUV pulling up outside. Chairman Running Bear emerged from one police vehicle, while from the SUV stepped a well-dressed man in his 60s, clearly an executive rather than a lawyer or scientist. "That's Victor Crane," Thomas said grimly, "CEO of Diamond Sky's parent company. He never involves himself directly in development projects." Morning Star struggled to sit up. "If he has come personally, the situation has escalated beyond local concerns." The chairman knocked firmly on the door. When Thomas opened it, Running Bear's expression was tense but determined. "Thomas, we need to speak with Tall Horse immediately," he said. "Mr. Crane has brought information that changes everything." Crane stepped forward, his keen eyes surveying the modest home with barely concealed disdain. "I understand you're the one behind all this disruption," he said to Tall Horse. "Perhaps you should know who you're really dealing with." He nodded to Running Bear, who reluctantly produced a folder. "Financial records," the chairman explained, "showing significant payments from Diamond Sky to Councilman Joseph Tsakei over the past year, and evidence that he falsified land surveys to hide sacred sites in the development area." The tribal council chamber overflowed with people. News of Councilman Tsakei's corruption had spread rapidly, and the emergency session had drawn not just council members but dozens of tribal citizens, reporters, and representatives from both Diamond Sky and the archaeological team. Tall Horse sat between Thomas and Morning Star, who had insisted on attending despite his weakened condition. Before them on the council table lay his father's war shield, a sacred item of protection that Morning Star had retrieved from the tribal museum for this crucial meeting. Its surface of hardened hide bore symbols of defense and spiritual power, surrounded by eagle feathers that seemed to tremble occasionally, though no breeze stirred the air. Chairman Running Bear called the session to order, his face grave. "We face a crisis of trust and purpose," he began. "Evidence of corruption within our leadership has been presented, but also evidence of something our ancestors would recognize: the awakening of powers long dormant in our sacred lands." He gestured toward Tall Horse. "Many have witnessed the phenomena in the Upper Canyon. Some call it supernatural, others seek scientific explanations. But none can deny something extraordinary is occurring." Councilman Tsakei was notably absent, having been detained by tribal police after the financial evidence was revealed. His strongest allies on the council looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with their colleagues. Victor Crane, seated with his legal team, requested permission to address the council. "We exposed Mr. Tsakei's corruption because Diamond Sky values transparency and ethical dealings," he stated smoothly. "We wish to proceed with a clean slate, dealing honestly with the legitimate leadership of the tribe." Thomas leaned over to whisper to Tall Horse, "Classic corporate strategy. Sacrifice one corrupt official to preserve the larger deal." Crane continued, "Our environmental impact studies show minimal disruption to the ecosystem. The archaeological find, while interesting, appears to be an isolated artifact rather than evidence of extensive historical settlement." Dr. Martinez rose immediately to contest this characterization. "Preliminary dating suggests the tablet is at least 300 years old, consistent with documented Apache presence in this region. This prophetic imagery, matching current events, with uncanny accuracy, suggests this site held profound spiritual significance." The debate continued, with scientific, legal, and cultural perspectives clashing. Throughout it all, Tall Horse remained silent, watching Ray Eyes, who stood invisible to most at the center of the chamber. Only he, Morning Star, and now Thomas could see her. "The roots extend beneath this very building," she told him quietly. "They remember the first council fires, the first agreements made on this land. They feel the discord now, the division of your people." As if in response to her words, a low rumbling sound vibrated through the building. Several people looked alarmed, thinking it might be an earthquake, but the tremor passed quickly. Elder Grace Running Water, who had been listening silently, rose to speak. "I have consulted with the other medicine people," she announced. "Last night, 7 of us performed the vision ceremony. All saw the same thing. Roots spreading beneath our land, nourishing our people for generations. All saw those roots now threatened, not just by buildings but by forgetting. She turned to face the assembly rather than just the council. Our young people leave because they no longer feel connected. The resort promises jobs. But at what cost? When the last elder who remembers the old ceremonies dies, who will teach the children their heritage? Her words struck a chord. Several younger tribal members nodded in agreement, including some who had initially supported the development. Chairman Running Bear called for an hour's recess to allow council members to consider all perspectives before voting. As people filed out, Michael Blackwater approached Tall Horse, clutching something in his hand. "I finished another carving," he said, opening his palm to reveal a small figure, recognizably Ray-Eyes, though rendered in a child's simple style. "You have talent," Tall Horse told him, genuinely impressed by the boy's progress. "She told me to give it to you," Michael said matter-of-factly. "Last night in my dream." Thomas overheard this exchange, his expression concerned. "Michael, you're dreaming about her too?" The boy nodded. "Lots of kids are. Jenny Two Stars, Bobby Whitecloud, Lizzie Running Bear. We all see her when we sleep. She shows us the roots under everything." This revelation stunned both Thomas and Tall Horse. The spirit's influence was spreading beyond what they had realized. "The children always see most clearly," Morningstar commented. "Their minds aren't clouded by doubt." As tribal members mingled during the recess, Tall Horse noticed something remarkable. Where people gathered in supportive conversation, speaking from the heart about their concerns for the tribe's future, small green shoots had begun to emerge from cracks in the council house floor. Tiny, living tendrils reaching upward toward the speakers. "The mother tree listens," Ray-Eyes explained. "She responds to truth spoken with good heart." Morningstar noticed the phenomenon too, pointing it out to others nearby. Soon, several people were staring in amazement at the small plants emerging through solid concrete. Meanwhile, in a corner, Victor Crane huddled with his attorneys, their expressions grim as they observed the changing mood of the tribal citizens. The corporate confidence he had displayed earlier was fading as he witnessed the growing unity among the people. When the council reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. The war shield on the table seemed to glow slightly in the chamber's light, its protective presence a reminder of battles fought and won in previous generations. As dusk approached, preparations for the ceremony intensified. The tribal council had voted overwhelmingly to protect the canyon, rejecting Diamond Sky's proposal despite Crane's last-minute offers to increase compensation and reduce the development footprint. What began as a divided tribe had unified in the face of corruption and the undeniable spiritual awakening manifesting throughout their land. Now dozens of tribal members worked together in the upper canyon, arranging stones in an ancient pattern around the mother tree and the root-entwined statue. Under Grace Running Water's direction, they prepared sacred fires at the 4 cardinal points, using wood gathered from specific trees and blessed with traditional prayers. Tall Horse sat cross-legged in his workshop, stripped to the waist while Grace and 2 other medicine women applied ceremonial paint to his skin. The mixture, created from rare minerals, plant extracts, and sacred waters, carried symbols representing both his past as a sculptor and his future as something not yet defined. These markings connect you to ancestors who performed similar transitions, Grace explained as she painted a spiraling pattern across his chest. They will help anchor your spirit during the ceremony. The designs were unlike anything Tall Horse had seen in modern Apache ceremonies. When he commented on this, Grace nodded knowingly. These patterns come from before reservation life, before the Spanish, before many of our current ways. The eldest elders remembered fragments, and Morningstar's grandfather's journal contained drawings. But the final designs, she hesitated. Those came to me in dreams sent by the mother tree herself. Through the workshop door, Tall Horse could see Victor Crane's sleek black SUV parked at the canyon entrance. Despite the council's decision, the executive had not departed. He still believes he can stop this, Morning Star observed, following Tall Horse's gaze. He does not understand what has been set in motion cannot be reversed by human authority. What if he's right? Tall Horse asked quietly. What if all of this, the roots, the statue, Ray Eyes, what if it's not enough? Morning Star placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, careful to avoid the fresh paint. Faith, my friend. After a lifetime of speaking to stone, can you not trust when the stone finally answers? Outside, the crowd had grown. Beyond the tribal participants, media crews positioned cameras to capture what had been described to them as a traditional ceremony to bless the protected land. University researchers set up instruments to record any unusual phenomena, while government officials observed with professional curiosity. Thomas Blackwater approached, carrying legal documents. It's done, he announced. The tribal attorney filed for an emergency protection order based on cultural and archaeological significance. With the council's unified statement and Dr. Martinez's preliminary findings, the federal judge granted a 6-month injunction against any development activity. And Crane? Morning Star asked. Still threatening lawsuits, but his company's stock dropped 15% today after news of the corruption scandal broke nationally. His board of directors is calling an emergency meeting. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. Corporate executives fear shareholders more than they fear spirits. As Thomas spoke, Michael appeared at his side, his young face serious. Dad, the other kids are ready. We did what she asked. Thomas looked confused. What? Who asked? What did you do? Ray Eyes. The boy answered simply. In our dreams. She told us to make a circle around the grown-up circle. We all brought something we made. Sure enough, 24 tribal children had formed their own circle outside the ceremonial area, each holding a small handmade object. Carved figures, woven bracelets, clay sculptures, painted stones. The children's circle, Grace murmured, her aged eyes widening. It is mentioned in the oldest stories, but has not been practiced in generations. As the medicine women completed Tall Horse's ceremonial painting, Ray Eyes appeared beside him. Though still invisible to most, her form had solidified further, taking on greater definition and presence. The time approaches, she said. When the first star appears, you must begin the final walk to the mother tree. I'm afraid, Tall Horse admitted, speaking low so only she could hear. Not of the ceremony, but of what comes after. If I lose my ability to create, you will create differently, she assured him. Not with hands and stone, but with something deeper. He studied her face, the face he had carved yet not carved, the face that had emerged from stone by some process beyond his understanding. Will I still be myself? You will be more yourself than you have ever been, she promised. The lonely path you walked was preparation, not destination. Outside, Victor Crane had exited his vehicle and was arguing with tribal police who prevented him from approaching the ceremonial area. His face was flushed with anger as he gestured toward the gathering. This changes nothing, he shouted, his voice carrying across the canyon. My company owns mineral rights beneath this land. Your superstitions won't stop progress. As if in response, the ground trembled slightly. Those nearest the mother tree gasped as its roots visibly shifted, breaking through more stone in a sudden surge of growth. Grace completed the final symbol on Tall Horse's forehead, a vertical line bisected by 3 horizontal marks, representing the connection between earth and sky. It is time, she said, stepping back to inspect her work. The old ones are waiting. The ceremony began as the first evening star appeared in the darkening sky. Tribal drummers established a heartbeat rhythm that seemed to pulse through the very stone of the canyon. Singers raised ancient songs that few still knew completely, their voices blending in harmonies that stirred something primal in all who heard them. Tall Horse stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, his painted body illuminated by the 4 sacred fires. In his hand he held the spirit blade, an obsidian knife with a handle carved from elk antler, used in ritual for centuries to symbolically cut ties with the past. Morning Star, supported by Thomas on one side and another elder on the other, approached Tall Horse with solemn purpose. "You stand at the threshold between what has been and what will be," he intoned formally. "Are you prepared to sever old bonds that new ones may form?" "I am," Tall Horse answered, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. The ceremonial words continued, ancient phrases passed down through generations of medicine people. As Morning Star spoke, Tall Horse became aware of a growing luminescence emanating from the root system surrounding the statue. The carved figure, now barely recognizable as stone, pulsed with gentle blue-green light that matched the glow from the mother tree above. In the outer circle, the tribal members began a slow, rhythmic dance, moving sunwise around the central space. The children in their own circle remained still, each holding their creative offering with expressions of unusual focus for one so young. As the ceremony progressed, unexpected participants arrived. Animals normally wary of human gatherings emerged from the canyon shadows. Deer, coyotes, birds of various species, even a rarely seen mountain lion. They positioned themselves between the adult and children's circles, watching with alert attention but showing no fear or aggression. Media crews filmed in astonished silence. Scientists checked and rechecked their instruments, struggling to quantify the measurable changes in electromagnetic fields, air composition, and even gravity fluctuations occurring within the ceremonial space. Tall Horse began his ceremonial walk, moving from the eastern point of the circle toward the statue and mother tree at the center. With each step, the painted symbols on his skin seemed to shift and move, as if alive on his body. The obsidian blade in his hand caught the firelight, reflecting it in sharp bursts of brilliance. Halfway to the center, a commotion at the perimeter broke through the ceremony's rhythm. Victor Crane had pushed past the tribal police, bringing with him several men in construction gear carrying equipment. "This stops now," he shouted. "My company has legal mineral rights, and we're conducting an emergency assessment." The workers looked uncomfortable but began setting up drilling equipment just outside the children's circle. The ceremonial songs faltered as tribal members turned in confusion and anger. Thomas moved to intercept Crane, legal documents in hand. "You're in violation of a federal injunction. Leave immediately or face arrest." "Try it," Crane sneered. "My company employs half the judges in this state." As the confrontation escalated, the ground beneath the drilling equipment suddenly heaved upward. Roots, massive and powerful, erupted through solid stone, knocking over the machinery and sending workers scrambling for safety. The children, rather than showing fear, raised their handmade creations high. Michael's voice rang out, surprisingly strong. "The mother tree says no." Other children echoed his cry. "The mother tree says no." This unexpected development momentarily stunned everyone present. In the silence that followed, Tall Horse resumed his ceremonial walk, reaching the center where the statue waited. Rayeyes now stood fully visible beside it, her form shimmering between solid and translucent. Those who had been unable to see her before gasped as she materialized before their eyes. "The time of choosing is here," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the entire gathering. "The land remembers when humans walked in balance with all living things. It can remember again." She extended her hand toward Tall Horse. "The vessel is prepared. The sacrifice must be made freely." Tall Horse raised the obsidian blade, its edge catching the firelight. With deliberate movements, he made the ceremonial cuts, not on his flesh, but in the air around his hands, symbolically severing his connection to his artistic gift. As he completed the ritual motions, The blade began to glow with the same blue-green luminescence as the roots and tree. Tall Horse felt a profound sensation of release, something essential flowing out of him and into the earth beneath his feet. At the same moment, Crane ordered his men to start a portable generator, powering up lights and a small excavator. "This superstitious nonsense doesn't impress me," he declared. "Either your tribal police remove these people, or my crew will work around them." The excavator lurched forward, its treads crushing small plants at the ceremony's edge. As it did, Ray Eyes cried out in pain, doubling over as if physically struck. "She feels it," Morning Star explained to the stunned observers. "All life connected by the roots feels the damage." Tall Horse, still holding the glowing blade, turned toward the disruption. Without conscious thought, he raised the knife toward the excavator. A surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced flowed through him, traveling from the earth, through his body, and out through the ceremonial blade. The excavator's engine died instantly. The generator followed, along with all electrical equipment in the vicinity. Cameras, lights, scientific instruments, even battery-powered devices. 1 year later, the canyon had transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been sparse desert vegetation interspersed with stone and sand, now a lush landscape flourished. The mother tree had tripled in size, its massive canopy providing shade for a diverse ecosystem that scientists still struggled to explain. At its base, where Tall Horse's statue had once stood, a new sapling grew, unlike any tree previously catalogued. Its trunk displayed patterns reminiscent of carved stone, while its leaves shifted color throughout the day, from deep emerald to the blue-green luminescence that had marked the ceremonial night. Tall Horse, changed but still recognizably himself, sat on a bench nearby, watching as tribal children played beneath the mother tree's protective branches. His hands, once calloused from decades of carving stone, now bore different marks, whorls of faint blue-green that appeared like natural tattoos across his skin. Morning Star, recovered from his illness and stronger than he had been in years, approached with a carved walking stick. "The university researchers are back again," he noted with amusement. "Third team this month. They'll never fully understand through their instruments," Tall Horse replied. "Some knowledge can only be felt." Since the night of the ceremony, the reservation had undergone remarkable changes. The ancient root network, now visible to all in the form of glowing tendrils that emerged periodically from the ground, had spread throughout tribal lands. Wherever they appeared, plants flourished, water ran clearer, and a palpable sense of vitality infused the area. Diamond Sky's parent corporation had withdrawn entirely following Victor Crane's very public breakdown. After witnessing Tall Horse's transformation and the supernatural response of the land itself, the executive had suffered what medical professionals termed an acute stress reaction. His incoherent statements about talking trees and living roots had been dismissed as temporary insanity, but the viral video of his flight from the ceremony had ended his career. Thomas Blackwater, recently elected as tribal chairman following Running Bear's resignation, joined them with his son Michael. The Conservation Trust finalized the purchase of the adjacent land, Thomas reported. With the expanded buffer zone, the canyon is protected permanently. Michael, now 13 and showing increasing promise as both an artist and a spiritual leader, pointed toward the sapling. "She's coming today. I can feel it." As if summoned by his words, Ray Eyes emerged from behind the young tree. No longer flickering between visibility and shadow, she now appeared fully physical, though an otherworldly grace remained in her movements. Since the ceremony, she had become a recognized presence on the reservation, teaching forgotten traditions, helping restore ceremonial sites, and showing particular attention to children with creative or spiritual gifts. Her relationship with Tall Horse defied conventional understanding. They were neither precisely husband and wife nor simply friends, but something for which the tribe had no modern term. The elders sometimes used an ancient word that translated roughly as two who are one. acknowledging the unique bond formed during the ceremony. "The council meeting went well?" she asked, approaching the group. Thomas nodded. The new educational program received full funding. Starting next month, every child will learn traditional knowledge alongside modern subjects. Tall Horse smiled, watching a butterfly land on Rayai's outstretched finger. Though he no longer carved stone, that ability had indeed left him on the ceremonial night. He had discovered new gifts. Where his hands touched the earth, plants responded, growing in patterns as intricate and beautiful as any sculpture he had created. Children sought him out for stories, their natural openness allowing them to sense the ancient wisdom now flowing through him from the root network. "Sometimes I still miss it," he admitted quietly to Rayai's when the others had moved away. "The feeling of stone becoming something new under my hands." "You create differently now," she reminded him, gesturing toward a section of the canyon wall where plants grew in a deliberate pattern, forming a living mural that depicted the tribe's history. "Your art now breathes." As the sun began to set, tribal members gathered for the weekly community meal held beneath the mother tree. What had begun as a small ceremony of gratitude had evolved into an important social tradition, strengthening bonds between families and generations. Tall Horse took his place in the circle, no longer the solitary figure who had spent decades speaking only to stone. As he looked around at the faces, elders he had known all his life, children born since the awakening, visitors from other tribes coming to learn from what had happened here, he felt a completeness that his former solitude had never provided. Where the root-embraced statue had stood, the sapling continued its improbable growth, already taller than a man after just 1 year. Someday, Tall Horse knew, it would become another mother tree, continuing the cycle of protection and renewal that had begun before human memory. He had built a statue for his future, never expecting that future would reshape him instead, transforming loneliness into connection, isolation into community, and one man's private art into a living legacy for generations to come.